Hello, I'm Donal Macaulay, and welcome to this Medics Voices conversation. Today I'm talking to Bruce Arroll in New Zealand. Now, Bruce, you've had the most wonderful, exciting, and interesting career, but I want you to take you back to the very beginning because you very nearly didn't do medicine. You started off in engineering.
That's right. My father was a pharmacist, and he wanted me to be a doctor. And I was quite good at maths at school, and my headmaster was a mathematician, and he tried to encourage me to go and do something with mathematics. So I went and did engineering for a couple of years, and I think I sort of realized, no, you have to be a genius at mathematics. And I was no genius. I was just pretty good at it. More, I could calculate. I wasn't one of these people who could imagine, four-dimensional things like some of the really bright scientists. So I did a couple of years, and then a friend of mine was thinking of going to medical school, and I thought it was too late to switch, and I just decided to switch. So after 2 years, I joined the class that I graduated in, and felt a bit old for the first 3 months, but after that, adapted. And a lot of those my best friends are classmates from that time.
Well, even at that stage, you had an international perspective because you went on an elective to Nepal.
That's right. Yes, the I knew the daughter of the Himalayan Trust doctor, who was a good friend of Ed Hillary's. Although I never met Ed Hillary at that point, I actually met Ed Hillary later in life as part of the Fred Hollows Foundation, which is an eye charity. And I went there for 3 months, and that was an amazing. I mean, it's visually a most amazing country, culturally extraordinary, and then the medicine was pretty amazing. I got very good at sort of not diagnosing, but diagnosing and treating tuberculosis with the old-fashioned drugs like streptomycin, which is what we were using at the time there. And I got up to Tangbochi Monastery. Didn't get quite to base camp because it snowed when I got up there. I didn't have the best footwear, and I was a bit afraid of frostbite. So I got up to about 12,000 feet and was able to see Mount Everest, which I took about 10 reels of photographs because in those days you didn't have a digital image. I wasn't sure any of it. I really wanted one that would come out. So I took about 12 reels, which I had to bring back to New Zealand to get developed before I knew I'd even succeeded in getting one. So we have a bit of a love affair with Mount Everest here because of Ed Hillary. So it looms large in our history as the first person to climb. So
And Nepal has stayed with you throughout your life because you're still involved.
I am. That's right. I'm on the Himalayan Trust now with Ed Hillary's son, Peter, who's climbed Everest twice, and his grandson, Alexander, who's the CEO. So I'm currently sending medical students to Nepal. We sent three up last year. One has since become a Rhodes Scholar, which has been pretty good. We're quite pleased about that, not because of the Nepal thing, but we're trying to send the best of students up there so they don't ruffle any feathers and they have a good experience. And they've all had a lovely. So I've got another one going up in a couple of weeks. So it's one of my roles on the Himalayan Trust is to select students from New Zealand to go up there and do their elective. So it's a wonderful place to do an elective.
Well, now, after you qualified, you spent some time in Canada and you went to that Cathedral of Evidence-Based Medicine. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. I lucked out there big time. I wrote to a bunch of places looking to do a master's in general practice, and McMaster wrote a beautiful letter back saying, "We don't think you're ready for a master's, but would you like to come and be a family practice resident?" So it was like a job offer. And I sort of said, "Great," signed the forms and off I went. And I didn't realize clinical epidemiology and evidence-based medicine were just starting then. And I got taught how to read a medical journal with Brian Hutchinson, who just passed away about 6 months ago, who was one of my teachers at McMaster with Jackie Wakefield. And that was so enlightening because, you like me were of that area where the senior consultant was right and the medical student was wrong. You can read the latest paper and you can be right and the boss can be wrong. So So that was very liberating. And the other amazing thing about McMaster was your educational needs trumped your service needs. And it was like a smorgasbord. I signed up for everything because I sort of went in the second year because I'd done a bit of general practice in New Zealand. And I was with Jackie Wakefield, who was one of the top guns. They put me with her because I'd done a bit of general practice and they thought she could probably contain me, which she did. And that was wonderful. They had the talent of people at McMaster. And it was amazing. I never met Dave Sackett that year because he was on sabbatical. I got to meet him later and was his minder in New Zealand. And after he retired, we kept in touch by email. I was very sad when he passed away, but what a wonderful man and what a wonderful contribution to healthcare. Um, and I liked Gordon Guyatt's thing that you did, where he said clinical epidemiology is the basic science of evidence-based practice. Because in recent years, I've started to call myself quietly a clinical epidemiologist because I've been quite interested in the science behind our decision making and also effective treatments, which I think all GPs should be interested in.
Well, you clearly enjoyed Canada because you stayed on and spent some time at UBC.
That's right. Yes. So I went to rural. I had to go to a place where no Canadian would work. In the first place I went to, my two colleagues were suing each other in court. So I got out after 10 months and went to Lillooet. And that was lovely. There were two older docs there. There was a Brit there and a Canadian who'd done their surgical training. So they did operations and things. We did a tracheotomy on a patient one night. And I had a lovely time. I've still got a lot of friends in Lillooet when I get back there. And then I went to Vancouver, did 6 months in the psych emerge, worked in general practice there, and then did a master's in clinical epidemiology. I think I was the first one to do, it was the public health training, and I was the first one to do the clinical epidemiology option with Martin Schechter and Sam Sheps. Marty Schechter had graduated from McMaster. So, and Clyde Hertzman, who passed away quite a few years ago, they were all McMaster acolytes. So McMaster had moved to the West Coast. So that was, and reconnected with Gordon Guyatt there. He came and he'd forgotten meeting me at McMaster, but we reconnected, and then I invited him to New Zealand to a couple of times. So we've kept in touch then.
Well, I can feel your inspiration coming through. So you brought that back to New Zealand and you did a PhD in clinical epidemiology.
That's right. Yeah. And that was with Robert Beaglehole, who's a big E epidemiologist and cardiovascular, and worked with Rod Jackson, who's become quite prominent over the years. He developed the cardiovascular risk assessment. He got one of those little Framingham calculators from Merck Sharp and Dome. And then we put that into a table, and then he published the cardiovascular risk tables, which have now become international. So we started then combining risk factors rather than treating risk factors. So now, I think you had the Q risk in Europe. We still do 5-year risk here. And Robert Beaglehole went on to work with the WHO. He was the director of non-communicable diseases for a while. So very handy having him as a boss. We got a few big publications, I think because of his name, not because of my name. Nobody knew me then.
Well, you've mentioned some intriguing names along the way, and you've met some fascinating people. Give us a flavor of some of the people you've met.
Well, I'd say there was a guy in Vancouver, and I don't remember his name. There's Carol Herbert was there at the time, who's quite well known. And my friend David Cool is still in Vancouver. And there was a GP there who said, the trouble with you academics is you don't talk medical shop anymore. You talk about your research. And I've always remembered that. And I always make sure when I'm with my clinical buddies, we talk shop. And I'm very pleased to see that Gordon Guyatt still does clinical work as well as his research work. And David Sackett actually went back and retrained as a physician. 55, he went back and did the residency again to get back the skills. So that was one. In my when I came back to New Zealand, I got invited. I'd read Archie Cochrane's biography, so I knew about Archie Cochrane. And I got an invite to the Cochrane setup in Australia. Ian Chalmers, never heard of him. Although, interestingly, the paper I'd done on episiotomy, which got me into research, he was on the West Berkshire trial. So I actually came across his name research-wise, but I didn't know who he was or where he was. And I found him particularly inspirational. I think he is a truly values-driven human being. So that got me in the Cochrane collaboration, and then meeting people like Chris Del Mar, who just passed away after a surfing accident a few years ago. They were great people to meet, and they really make you want to work with them, basically. And the whole Cochrane thing was amazing because I had a number of BMJ systematic reviews. The Cochrane software just made that so easy to do. You could do that whole science of systematic reviews, and the ability to do a meta-analysis without having, all sorts of software was pretty amazing. So yeah, meeting Ian was quite inspirational at that point in my life.
Well, taking you back a little bit because you did your house jobs with a remarkably unusual person.
Yeah, Richard Smith, of all people. I was the trainee intern, he was the house surgeon, and a chap called John Colby was the registrar. And Richard just made us like, he's such a funny, clever man. He can just have you rolling around the floor in laughter. And we did think it was rather odd he was going off to be a deputy editor of the BMJ. I'd never heard of the BMJ before that. And I remember thinking, bit of a waste of it, bit of a dead end, only to see him explode the quality of the BMJ, which is actually one of my favorite journals. It's one of my favorites, particularly the Christmas BMJ. That was one of my goals. I've had 2 Christmas BMJs, which were a lot of fun. Still trying to get my 3rd one. I want to get the trifecta there. I've got one more idea, yeah, no, I think the Christmas BMJ is just a great thing.
We've talked about your research and your interest in clinical epidemiology, but actually you have a great interest in education as well. Tell us about your interest in education and where that came from.
Well, when I was a medical student, I can remember sort of subtly assessing my lecturers for quality of lectures. And, we went from the truly great to the truly awful. Medical students are forced. And I remember one guy, he was a lovely, lovely man, but he did the anatomy of the respiratory tract. And instead of starting from the nose and going to the alveoli, he sort of jumped around all over the place. And I kept thinking, if I was doing this lecture, I'd start at one end and go to the other, so you could see how the cells changed. And I always thought I would like to be a really good teacher. So throughout my career, I really enjoy teaching. It's one of the things I love. And in fact, when I retire from the university, I will have a major grief experience at not having a class of medical students. I'll still have medical students in the clinic with me, but and I've looked at ways of making teaching exciting and getting feedback. And I have a website called brucearroll.com, which has a little how to give a good talk thing there, if anybody's interested. So I love doing lectures. I love trying to make things simple for people, trying to simplify them. I think you can think you know a topic and go to a lecture, and somebody can make you, if you come out feeling like you know less afterwards, that's a bad experience. And more recently, in the last 10 years, I've been director of the Goodfellow unit at the University of Auckland, which some people think is the department because it's fairly prominent, set up by the Goodfellow family 40 years ago, who are a fairly generous family in New Zealand. And we got into podcasts and webinars and a lot of digital stuff fairly early. I'm quite amazed at how podcasts now are exploding. I mean, I listen to American political podcasts and some British politics things, and there's just so many. But when we started 10 years ago, we were one of the first kids on the block for medical podcasts, and that's been very satisfying having that. Because I feel like as a researcher, I generate all this new knowledge. Does anybody take any notice of it? Probably not. So the idea is to try and get clean, clear information, as Muir Gray would say. We want to get clean, clear information to the troops, just as we try to get clear, clean water to the population in the 19th century. What we need these days is clear, clean information. So, and that, of course, with the modern disinformation has its own challenges. But no, that's a lot of fun. So we have a group of about 6 of us, and we produce a webinar every 2 weeks, a podcast every 2 weeks, online stuff all the time. So we do about 200 products a year. So this digital world is amazing.
Now, let me ask you about something else, because you have such a wide range of interests. You're now a life coach.
I heard a woman called Cherie Johnson who does coaching for doctors in Australia. She was on Sam Manger's podcast, the GP View, I think it's called. And I thought, wow, and she's written a book. And I contacted her and she said, well, if you want to work for me, you have to do this course through IECL in Sydney. They're one of the best coaching organizations. So for the last 2 years, I've been doing the coaching training with them. And I have to say, there's quite an overlap with clinical medicine, because as I say to my students, you think you're going to be doctors. Actually, you're training to become behavior change specialists, getting somebody to follow your advice after an operation. You need to change people's behavior to get people to take a medication. It's all about behavior change. And I think the coaches do it better than the doctors. They really have a whole lot of checklists to make sure people are going to do it. And I'm offering free coaching to final year medical students at the moment. And so that's been pretty interesting, getting them and just hearing what their concerns are, because and it seems like imposter syndrome is probably one of the big things for them. That seems to be bothering a lot of them. Well, they're just about to go out in the real world and become doctors, of course. So you can imagine that interface is a bit stressful for some students.
Well, allied to that, you also are involved in something called Focused Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, FACT. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, I got interested in this. A colleague of mine called Peter Bowden, who was a community GP, came to the department one day with a stack of books, and he started talking about a bunch of things, including acceptance and commitment therapy. And I'd been hearing this word. This is 2015, and I had a sabbatical in Vancouver, and I went down to Yakima, which is 3 hours drive east of over the mountains from Seattle, to spend a week with a Dr. Kirk Strossel, who was one of the founders of acceptance and commitment therapy. And his wife and him figured out, if you want to provide psychological help to primary care, you've got to be embedded in the clinic and see patients as they turn up. But his wife, Patty Robinson, was doing it for the US Air Force. And not because of me, but the New Zealand government were looking for this. And she came to, so we now have hundreds of health improvement practitioners in New Zealand trained by Patty Robinson. So I've been going more to ACT conferences in recent years than primary care ones, because I've got more interested in mental health. And I find there's not enough mental health at primary care conferences. There's everything else. And my focus now, my research focus in the last probably 25 years has been becoming more increasingly interested in rapid diagnosis and rapid interventions, basically. And I discovered just a few years ago through Pim Kalpers in Amsterdam, who I got to know, he's a meta-analyst, that behavioral activation is the most effective treatment for depression, not drugs. Drugs really only work in the very severe depression. But the effect size is still smaller than that's where the evidence-based practice has been quite good, because I'm always running around looking for effect sizes, looking for big ones, and the big ones aren't with the drugs, with mental health things, they're with the behavioral activation. So that's been quite a fun journey in itself. And now I've got a single question for depression. So my emotional quality of life, it was in the British Journal of General Practice. We validated. And that was interesting, because I audited my practice. But anyway, it's quite a popular paper on the British Journal of General Practice Open with the single question.
So we've ranged across your entire career and all these academic and various commitments. But finally, I'd like to bring you back to real general practice, because that's where you are at the moment. you're working in a mission environment. Tell us a little
Yes.
bit about that.
Yes, about a year ago, I left South Auckland because the driving to South Auckland was getting too hard. And I did a locum for my colleague, Nairi Kurse, and really like the staff. The staff are extraordinary because you have to be. The average age of death is 51 in this clinic. And the people are very, very medically very sick. When I got there, I discovered pretty well everyone's got a diagnosis of PTSD because that goes with substance use and homelessness and all that sort of stuff. And so I'm now interested in an intervention called written exposure therapy, which I'm about to do my last randomized trial. I haven't got the energy to do any more randomized trials, but we're doing a little randomized trial in the mission. It's very effective. About 95% of people get a pretty good response. It's about writing about your trauma on 5 occasions based on the work of Pennebaker from Texas, their expressive writing. So that's pretty exciting. I've got an honours student. It was only because I had the honours student I went to all this trouble. I've really run out of energy for ethics committee and clinical trials registry and all the circus that goes on about, just even starting a randomized trial. There's been a year's work, but I'm really, really enjoying the place. The characters are amazing. The medicine is amazing and the staff are amazing. So I'm having probably another 10 years and then that's it for me. So I leave the university in a couple of years. So that will be a very sad moment, but it's been a good run.
Bruce, just when you say it's a good run, I'm thinking, what will the title of the movie of your life be? And I think you've said the title, it'll be My Last Randomized Controlled Trial.
And you'll say famous last words,
Bruce, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for sharing so much of your life and your career and your interests. It's just been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay.